بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى النبي وعلى صحبه اجمعين. ومن تعلم التعليم وتذكر التذكير من تعليم خير الاسلام. وتذكر كتاب الله وسنه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء الى الخير. الدلاله على الهدى التوجه سبحانه وتعالى وتوجه قلبه. سبحان الله لا ولا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له لا اله الا الله العظيم. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد ملك السلام ونبي الجلال وعلى كل أخبارنا وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه جل عرش ذلك لمن تعمل كل حرف الفتح ويكتب وقل ويقرأ والسميع ويسمع ولا يرى إلا أبجد له اللاهبين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا فأنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من فضلك علما. قال المؤلف رحمه الله تعالى تعالى رضي عنه وبه ورضى عنكم إلى أن قال. So yesterday we spoke about this very important principle about bringing to mind that one is indeed the deputy of the Prophet ﷺ and of their chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ in everything that they do. And one of the ways of purifying one's heart and one's actions is to bring in mind this idea that one is indeed only fulfilling a purpose. And the important thing when it comes to understanding the legacy of Islam is that the person is not more important than the message. Meaning after the Prophet ﷺ, right, if we take ourselves, we merely have to carry the trust to be able to give it back to, hand it over to the next generation. And the whole purpose of tarbiyah also of children and also of students in the next generation is to prepare them to fulfill their duty to the best of their abilities. So your teaching and the tarbiyah would be to bring them to the level that they can understand the trust, take it over, and likewise to following generations. So Habib we stopped yesterday when he said, وَمَنْ كَانَ يَنُوبُ عَنْ حِبَالِ النِّيَابَةِ الْمُتَّصِلَةِ بِالنُّبُوَّةِ فَلْيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ فِي ذَوْقِهِ وَتَرْجُمَتِهِ. And whoever now has this idea of deputization and is connected to these chains of narration going back to the Prophet ﷺ, then he has to fear Allah in his spiritual experiences, or his deputization of his spiritual experiences and the translation into his actions. And he needs to be sincere, because whoever is sincere, they will be prepared to receive greater gifts. And whoever prepares themselves well, then negligence, laziness, okay, following one's ego, he will be able to overcome these sins. Because a person's nafs and the ego naturally leans towards taking things easy and making claims. And turning towards its desires. And so it is imperative that we purify and we cure ourselves of these diseases. How? By establishing this deputization in the best of ways. ويكون الاجتهاد دائما ومستمرا في تصفية القلب والفؤاد ونفع العباد. And there needs to be a constant jihad, a constant striving, continuously in purifying one's heart, one's mind, and in benefiting people. وكلما عرض عليك خاطر ينزل بك إلى تحت بأي معنى من معاني نزول السقوط أعرضت عنه وصمت. So whenever any thought comes to pull you down, right? بأي معنى من معاني النزول والسقوط. In any form of dissension or deficiency, anytime there's any thought, right? And this happens in different ways. So you're supposed to attend, for example, you're supposed to go for salah. Okay, let me have my tea first, right? Or someone harmed you, you wanted to reply to them. Any thought, and what's interesting here is Habib is saying that when any thought desires to bring you down, meaning this jihad is something that's constant 24/7, and it's a jihad in the mind more than it is in the action, because the actions always spring from the mind. So whenever any thought tries to bring you down, you turn away from it and you elevate yourself. And the way to always think and deal with thoughts, Imam Ghazali actually talks about this. We mentioned it a few days ago. One is to imagine yourself, or imagine your nafs as being someone else. And then you address your nafs and you say, oh nafs, you want me to do this? I won't do it. Or be diplomatic. Say, we'll do it later. And you just keep delaying it. And what's interesting about the nafs or the mind, that you are in control. If you talk to it and you tell it what to do, it will listen. Right? And we just have to apply that. Now also you find some of these scholars in these different fields of, what do we call them? This modern day positivity thinking type of sciences. They talk about the same thing now, right? And they write books about this. There's a guy, there's an Egyptian author who used to work for one of these big companies as well. And he also wrote a book on the subject as well, That Voice in Your Head, I think it's called, That Voice in Your Head. How to deal with the thoughts. And the crux of it is the same thing. You tell it what to do and it will listen to you. But our problem is, whenever the thought just comes, what do? We go with the thought. Meaning, the ego and the nafs is controlling us, right? One is to be diplomatic and say, listen, we'll do it later. And the other way, Imam Ghazali's way, is if you're going to tell me to do this, then we're going to punish you. Tomorrow we're going to fast, right? No lunch for you today, right? Or we're going to go read 2 or 3 or 4 rak'ats of salah. Every person will learn the way in which they are able to control their nafs. So you have to turn away from it and go forward. The other way of thinking, whenever a thought comes, a person has to imagine that, for example, if you imagine the hereafter, and the whole purpose of the hereafter is to bring us back to the reality of the choices that you're making now. Everything has an effect in the hereafter, right? So that good action that you did reflects in the hereafter. And to always imagine that the person, for example, is on the sirat. When you're passing by on the sirat, what's going to happen? You can either slip or fall, depending on the actions that you did in the world, right? So if you paid heed to this evil thought, that's actually a slip on the sirat. And the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and the awliya, they're all waiting on the other end. And you have to imagine this thought coming, wants to pull you down. So you've got to throw the thought and just dart for your goal. So these are the strategies one has to develop to deal with shaitan, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he describes shaitan in the Quran, he says he is aduwwun mubin. He is a plain enemy for you. فَاتَّخِذُهُ عَدُوًّا. In other words, so take him as an enemy, right? And if an enemy is waiting in ambush for you, do you leave your house without preparation? You have to prepare your strategies, your defense mechanisms. And what's worse, which is the worst enemy than shaitan? Who's the worst enemy than shaitan or iblis? The ego. The nafs. Okay. The nafs. Because the ego and the nafs lies inside you. And so the awliya always make a dua that, Allah, you have put against us an enemy from outside that is waiting in ambush, and an enemy from inside that we do not even know, right? And therefore the salvation is to seek protection in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is to use these strategies to deal with the nafs, okay? But the purpose of it is to move on the path. Some people then get so caught up with the nafs and so caught up with their spiritual diseases and so that now your entire time is involved only with yourself, and you forget that you actually have a goal to go to. It's like a person who's going for Hajj back in the day and he's going to a certain location, but he spends his whole day cleaning the car and checking the petrol and the tires and the pressure and everything else. He never actually, and then he's wondering about this small scratch here and this there. He never actually gets into the car to go. They say, Siru ilallahi urjan wa makasir. Travel to Allah broken and crippled. Right? You try your best and you continue. Because you don't want to, at the end of the day, for example, if you are going for if you've been invited for a wedding or a feast or a banquet and you're going to someone's house, I'm sure I give this example, and along the way there's a dog that comes in, the dog from one of the neighbors' houses comes in, starts barking at you. So you pick up a stone and you throw it. What's going to happen? It's going to come back. What will you do? You pick up another stone and throw it. You waste all your time in the banquet to have finished. But what's the best thing to do? Call the person of the house, say, listen, your dog is troubling me. And by one call or one sign or whatever, the dog will go. So the dogs of our hearts and the dogs of the shayateen that are trying to distract us, who controls them? They move by whose will, right? Therefore, the protection. Therefore, even this dua, Rabbi a'udhu bika min hamazati shayateen wa a'udhu bi rabbika yahdurun. This is the word on the tongues of the awliya. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Right? There should be a word of protection from shaitan every day. Once you've done your work, understand, always remember, never be distracted by the obstacles from the goal. Right? If being involved with the obstacles is distracting you from the goal and delaying you from the goal, then you must see the point as well. Person will never be perfect, but we try our best to move towards the goal. لأنه في الدعاء الوارد النبوي الذي تدعو به في الصباح والمساء وأعوذ بعظمك أن أغتال من تحتي. It was one of the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ when making his daily supplications in the morning and evening was to seek protection in being taken from underneath or being undermined. Right? This concept Habib is saying about when a thought is coming to bring you down. The Prophet ﷺ made dua against this. Being taken unawares. Right? This is the meaning of this. To be taken unawares. وهو أن ينزل الإنسان من رتبة عالية إلى أدنى. Meaning of it is for a person to drop from an elevated status into a lower status. فهذا اغتيال من تحت. This is a form of being taken unawares. وإنما يكون المبلغ والمعلم والمرشد والإمام والمذكر والخطيب والدال في كل وقت أصفى أنقى أوفى أعظم أحزم وأطهر. Okay, and whether a person is a caller, whether he's a teacher, whether he's a guide, whether he's an imam, whether he's one who's just reminding people, whether he's a khatib, whether he is taking people by the hand, meaning any form of da'wah or any form, even a person who is a father or spouse, right, a mother, in all of these states, a person needs to continuously be pure, right? He needs to be fulfilling his job with more faithfulness. And they need to be greater in their regard and reverence for the duty that they are doing. They need to have more determination and they need to have more purity in their hearts. فَيَكُونُ فِي كُلِّ وَقْتٍ أَحْسَنْ مِنَ الَّذِي قَبْلَهُ. And therefore they will continuously be better than they were in times that had passed. And so this is not something which we do on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis. Right? It is a constant battle. Now, if we look at this, it's a very difficult thing. Basically, in every single breath, you have to be better than the period before. So now a person needs to think about, for example, what are my good moments and what are my bad moments? In my daily life, what are the times that I'm doing things correctly, and what are those things which take me down, right? And then you need to start putting strategies in place. So, for example, if you know you have certain times of the day where you just sit lazy, and for example, you might just be using the internet without pure intention, right? And that takes you down, and you need to organize that particular time for something productive. And this is why Imam Ghazali in Bidayat al-Hidayah, he organizes your day from morning to evening, in that every part of the day you would have something to do. And if you look at the lives also of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the way they live their lives. They have one thing, as soon as they're done with this, they're on to the next thing. As soon as that is done, they're on to the next thing. The entire day, Habib, for example, every day, right, one of his students or his secretary will come and they have the whole day's events planned out. From this time to this time, this time to this time, this time to this time. To give you an example, right? One day you take a guest. Some guests came to Tarim, so we come to Habib Umar's house for lunch. So we were meant to have lunch with him, right? And obviously you're not the only person. There'll be like 15 different people. And now, when they come, obviously they have lunch, then the munshid will sing some qasidas, lunch will be served, and then Habib washes his hands, and then they give him tea. Now there's about 15 minutes left for, so lunch came, lunch was free. You're supposed to meet Habib in this one and that one. There's 15 minutes left for the Asr Salah. So you take the opportunity, you go introduce him to this one, while you're there, someone else is coming and he's got a new baby, he wants him to do the tahniq, right? And someone else comes and he's got a letter because of something else. In 15 minutes, 15 to 20 people come, each with their own, right? And it's like there's barakah in the waqt. When he's speaking to you, it's like this, there's hours. When you actually realize what happened, one of the students that came, he was traveling. We didn't have an opportunity for him to greet Habib before he went. So we called some of the people that were with Habib. He said, okay, you know what? Catch Habib as he's getting out of the car. So the car is going to be parked here. It's going to be moving into the house. So what do? You wait at the door. So, but it had been arranged, obviously, because the adab is that you don't interrupt the Shaykh in their private times going into the house and coming out. So as we arrived, as he said, okay, we're on the way, we waited with the car. As the car, we opened the door, Habib just waited in the car and sat, right? So the door open, one leg in, one leg out. And then he starts talking to this student. How are you doing? What did you do? How did you study? What did you achieve? You know, are you going home for whatever? It was like 3 or 4 minutes, but it felt like an entire hour. And obviously then there were other students. By the time we walked into the house, we had spoken to another 3 or 4 or 5 people. But that's all planned as part of the stay, that there will be these people, the people that obviously arrange Habib stuff. Why? It's because they don't have time. There's no thing where you're going to go and you're going to sit there. You know, okay, I got a meeting with the Shaykh now, I'm going to sit there and we're going to chat for hours. They got more important things than our small issues. So many times even when a person speaks to Habib Umar and he says, I need to speak to you about something, he says, Taraqqab al-fursa. He says, see where you can get an opportunity to speak to. Right? Because they are busy with what? They are busy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is their main duty. Right? And many times as students of teachers, we don't realize that what we think is important to us, it's not important at all. We're worried about, you know, maybe a bad thought or you have a concentration in salah. And generally what a student needs, they would find in the program that the teacher has put in place. So if a person has been doing their daily adhkar or they are attending the lessons and they pay attention in the lessons, right? Everything that they need will be sorted out. Therefore, many times you will find you have an issue, you have a question, but if you attend the lesson or you attend the talk, then, and Shaitan's greatest distraction for a person on the path is to make him think that there's something more important than that which was allocated for him to do at that particular time. So it's time for revision. Shaitan will make you think, oh no, I need to be doing something else. It's time to do your dhikr, so Shaitan will, you know, now I do this time, you know, I can do revision at that particular time. And hikmah is what? Hikmah is putting everything in its place. And training the nafs, the whole purpose of also these programs, right? When people come for the door and stuff, is to train the nafs that you do everything at a particular time, at a particular place. One of the things the nafs also likes to do, it likes to be, they call it infirad. It likes to be above people, want to be doing something. So everyone's doing one thing, you want to do something else, right? Because it wants the sense of wanting to be different, you know. So everyone's reading the khulasa, no, I must go find some other type of adhkar to do. Why? Because I've got to do more than others. No, the whole purpose is to do it together. What's the purpose of the hajj as well? And a person goes into the tawaf, right? Is that your individualities disappears. You move with the way. If you're still worried about this person bumping you and that one, you're never going to enjoy your tawaf. The whole purpose of it is to go with the flow, right? You forget your individuality. And the tawaf, many people when they go for hajj, they think about, or they go for umrah and they're thinking about, you know, I want to be in the Kaaba and private moments with Allah. You're not going to find that thing. Because Allah is teaching you now how to be with Him, with your heart and your mind, in whatever's happening, right? And this person is bumping you. How do you not let that distract you from your divine communion, right? And then also this teaches you when you're in your day-to-day, when you come back, right? You're in traffic, you just, how are you not distracted by things and you just constantly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so one of the techniques also that we find, especially in the city of Tarim, and anyone that's come to Tarim, you notice that there are many masajid. There's a masjid here, like just next to it, there's another masjid. 2 streets down, there's another masjid. Right? Back in the old days, they would say there were more than 360 masajid in Tarim. Now, obviously, there's many, many more. Some of the old masajid have become joined to become one. But I always wondered and I thought, like, what's the purpose of having so many masajid? Right? Literally, the masjids are next to each other, right? And in our concept, we would think, okay, you know, it's better to have one masjid and people can attend, and there's a bigger crowd. Until I realized that one of the hikmas, obviously there might be many, many hikmas, is that it was the responsibility, or they took it upon themselves, these imams and even these students, that they would build a masjid, obviously for the reward that is promised in the hadith for building the masjid as well, right? But if you build a masjid and you're the imam, will you ever miss your Fajr Salah and your Dhuhr Salah? If you're the imam and the mu'adhin, right? So one of the greatest ways of istiqamah is to take on responsibilities which make you fulfill those duties, right? And imamah and salah is one of those greatest things. We would find that they would even build masajid or make waqf of rooms in their houses as a masjid. And then they would appoint one of their sons or someone to be in Shafi madhab. You can have a masjid in your house as waqf, right? You can make waqf of a particular room as a masjid, and it has all the rules of the masjid, right? And now when you have a masjid, there has to be an imam. If the imam is not fulfilling his duty, this is a deficiency with regards to that particular masjid. The Hanafi madhab, you can't have a masjid in the place unless there is a road that which the common man can travel through. But in the Shafis, it's absolutely fine. You can have it. And so there would be in every house a particular area where even the woman of that house, they would be allocated, right, duties for that particular masjid and particular salah times, right? So one of the sons, and Shafi madhab, even one of the women could lead the imam. So it's treated like a masjid with salah times. Adhan is given at this particular time, iqamah is given at this particular. How do you run a masjid, right? Why? Is because those are your most important responsibilities. And many times when you look at our relationships with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people will ask sometimes the Mashaykh questions, this, that, and whatever, I'm doing this, that, and that. The first question is your 5 times salah in order, right? And many times, most of what we're doing, right, in our down moments or when we feel we start spiraling down is because 5 times salah is not in order, right? Put that in order and everything else. A person who wants to do dhikr, tell him just to do the 5 times salah, right? And his dhikr will come. Why? It's because when you're in the masjid, those things are going to get sorted out. One of the people came to one of the pious female awliya, and he wanted to, I think they had caught him burglaring one of the homes or something like that, right? And he came and he wanted to propose to the daughter of one of the awliya, but he wasn't obviously. He said, no problem, right? Perform your 5 times salah for 40 days in this particular masjid, and then come. And so the first day, second day, and now he's doing it in the beginning just because he's got a goal, he's got an ulterior motive that he wants to, right? And every day he goes and comes and he says, today I did all my 5 times salah. After the first week, he's coming and saying, did you see this, that? He wants to keep a record of what he was doing. By the second week, he stops coming to this person, right? By the end of the 40 days, that Shaykh had to call him to find out now what's happening. He says, Khalas, we don't need your daughter. We have found a Muslim, right? And that's the whole purpose. If we just put ourselves back on track with the basics, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so kind to us, right? That what He made as obligatory for us is your key to you, right? And many of the other spiritual practices, what happens, people start paying more attention to it. Why? Because they're looking for solutions in that, but they're neglecting the basis. Therefore, they say, they were prevented from reaching the goal because the foundations weren't in order. So get the foundations in order. You're doing a lot of dhikr, whatever, but your salah is not in order. Cut down the dhikr and get your salah in order, right? And this is an extremely important principle in terms of building oneself to be able to tread the path. Umar then goes on to say, وَقَالَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ يَقُولُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. So we were talking about that also. They would also, for example, if in today's times there's such a need also for people. Within your own home, you make an arrangement in your home with your family that this particular time we are going to be having a family halaqa or family lesson to read from one of the books of the biographies of the pious, and you protect. So in your home, which are those times which are times of negligence, and you put those lessons in place in your home, right? If you have to, even with your neighbors, find one student, find any student who you can teach something. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a book of deen. Why? Because your time you need to use your time and protect your time from what? From falling, not just wasting your time, but falling from these spiritual states which Umar is speaking from. So you could be helping a neighbor even with tuition. But your intention is to protect your time, because you know, if I'm not doing that, I'm going to be doing something worse, and that becomes your form of ibadah. وقال رضي الله تعالى عنه يقول الله تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول. Okay, this particular paragraph, everyone is talking about the conversations that people have and the meetings that people have and the talkings that happen between people and the effects of that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا أو you who believe إذا تناجيتم. Munaja means communion, conversation, right? Therefore, when they talk with Kolia, they would say, Munajatillah. They would talk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something also that we don't do. In our du'as, we just make the very, very staple forms of du'as, but we don't talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes people will come and sit with the Shaykh and they'll complain and they'll say, you know, this letter, the Shaykh will listen to him for a whole 5 minutes. And after the whole 5 minutes, he says, so all that you told me now, did you ever tell? Did you speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did you ever tell? Right? And this is what we don't do. And again, why? We are seeking the solutions from other than where they ought to be sought. So they would say, munaja, this communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you read the adhkar or the what they call the ahzab, which were the litanies which the pious wrote. It was all a collection of their munaja, of how they didn't think one day and you know, I want to start writing this within their daily times that they spent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah then inspires your heart to speak to him in certain ways, right? And how a person makes dua, you can tell a person's relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the way they make dua, right? And therefore sometimes some of the pious wouldn't even want to make dua in public because they don't want to expose their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And other people, because they need to guide people and take them and teach them how to make dua, then they would. So, for example, Habib on his the Thursday nights dua, and just look at that, right? And this has become very common. This is called the ibtihal. The ibtihal is what? Where the hadith mentions the Prophet. He said, the time will come in the end of times when nothing will benefit a person except the dua ul ghariq, except the dua of one who is drowning. When you're drowning, how do you scream? Imagine if you have to make dua to Allah and you're drowning. Say, oh Allah, please save me from drowning. I'm drowning, Ya Allah, please. Or you're going to be screaming at the top of your lungs, right? That's the dua person is. And you can only make the dua in public if you have been making the dua in private, right? But do we in our private moments actually make dua in this particular way? The earnestness or the enormity of the problem, do we make our dua just even in the way we make the dua? Does that match the problem that we want to solve? Or do we think that we have a claim against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I make dua and the whole purpose of dua is the connection, right? And the problems in our lives and the calamities and the tribulations all come because that connection is not there. And it's to put you that whoever remembers me in times of ease, I will remember them in times of difficulty. So you who believe in that when you meet, within your conversations, when you meet, discuss amongst yourselves, فَلَا تَتَنَاجُوا بِالْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Do not converse in things which involve sin and enmity, creating enmity between people, وَمَعَصِيَةُ الرَّسُولِ, and disobeying the Prophet. Because the enemies of the Prophet, they would gather to do what? To plot and plan and see how they can disunite the Muslim fabric and how they can actually oppose the Prophet. وَتَنَاجُوا بِالْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Converse in piety and taqwa, right? Meaning when we gather together and in our meetings, we need to always constantly be speaking about what? How can we be better? How can we improve our taqwa? How can we improve our piety? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ, and then fear Allah, the one to whom you will be returned. فَيَتَرَتَّبُ عَلَى التَّنَاجِ بِالْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ إِفْشَارُ الشُّرُورِ فِي النَّاسِ. So the effects of people gathering and conversing about sins and enmity, what happens? Evil then spreads amongst humankind, the whole world. وَعَلَى تَنَاجِمِ الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى انْتِشَارُ الْخُيُورِ فِي النَّاسِ. And if people converse about piety and goodness, then goodness is spread in the society. وَيَنْشُرُ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى الْخَيْرُ وَالْهُدَى عَلَى أَيْدِي أَقْوَامٍ يَتَنَاجَوْنَ بِالْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَطَاعَةِ الرَّسُولِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then cause goodness and guidance to spread at the hands of those people who are always conversing about piety and taqwa and how to be obedient to the Prophet كما ينشر في واقع الناس الشرور والفساد بواسطة أقوام يتجاهلون بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول. Likewise, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would choose those people who involve themselves in conversing about evil, right, and enmity, creating enmity amongst people, and disobedience. Allah will cause the evil in society to happen in their hands. So even just sitting at home and talking, we can make jokes about certain things, but there is an effect of that speech. We spoke earlier in 2 lessons of the connection between the heart and the tongue, right? And so what you are talking about reflects, means in all of the action that you are going to be doing for the rest of the day, what you discuss in the morning with your friend with regards to evil, what happens? The choices that you make now, are based on that, because that speech means that that heart is impure, meaning all of the decisions that heart is going to be making and exposed are going to be impure decisions. Allah then says in the Quran, have you not seen those who were prevented from najwa, this sort of conversation, right? Then they return to that which they were forbidden from. They continue to converse in sin and creating enmity amongst people, and disobeying the Prophet. And then when they come to you, these are the hypocrites, then when they come to you, Prophet Allah, they greet you in a way in which Allah does not greet you, right? They would greet the Prophet with certain terminologies which in the Arabic language had the meaning of a curse rather than, right? They would tell the Prophet Assalamu alaikum. Assam means poison, instead of saying Assalamu alaikum. Jews used to do this to the Prophet. And Sayyidina Aisha anha, and look at the character of the Prophet, the purity in his life, right? Sayyidina Aisha anha, when she heard this, and she said, Wassalamu alaikum wa la'an, and she started to curse them. And Sam means poison or death upon you. So she said, and death upon you, and the curse of Allah, and the Prophet said, Aisha, did you not hear what I replied? What did you guys say? Wa alaik, and upon you. Right? And upon you. So also the way we deal with this type of people reflects the state of our hearts. Now, many times also when we read this, we must realize, when we read also the lives of the Sahaba, it's very important. The Sahaba were being trained by the Prophet. When we look, or we have to sometimes mention this to people, when they think of the awliya, they think of, or if a person has a Shaykh, for example, they think of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, Imam al-Haddad, they think of these refined personalities, right? When their character represented that of the Prophet. But when they read the lives of the Sahaba, because they're reading about the process that the Sahaba went through, sometimes they don't have this magnanimous image in the mind of the Sahaba. So for example, in this example, said Aisha, they did this. But does it mean that her character wasn't? That was her lesson. And she became, through that, because that was the lesson the Prophet used to change, she became better than that. So the Prophet, when he passed away, many of the Sahaba, they had reached these highest levels of wilayah. That is why no wali and no saint can have a station higher than that of the Sahaba. What does that mean? They had reached the peaks of perfection in their characters and in the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also when we read the history of sometimes these things that happened between the Sahaba, like we said, we return perfection to the Prophet. We need to return perfection to them and have a good opinion on them as well. Because if you have a bad opinion about the Sahaba, right, you say this murid is a bad murid. What is the implication? That you're implicating that his Shaykh is not there. So if you disparage the Sahaba, what in effect, what are you saying? The Prophet didn't do his job well. Right? So the hearts of the Sahaba were the purest hearts after the Prophets had ever existed. There was no hatred and anger and malice and jealousy and all of these things between them. Right? And we need to interpret these two. What does a person benefit in interpreting things that happen between the Sahaba in a negative way? Right? You just poison your own heart. Right? And they would say a good opinion about someone benefits you even if that is not correct. If you think this person is a saint, right? And we ought to think that everyone is the same, right? Even if he is not, you will benefit from that opinion. But if you think a bad opinion about someone, then it will be detrimental for you, even if you are correct. بما لم يحيك به الله ويقولون في أنفسهم, and they say in themselves لولا يعذبنا الله بما نقول, why does Allah not punish us for that which we are saying? حسبهم جهنم يصلونها فبئس المصير, that Jahannam is sufficient for them and they will burn therein, and the most evil of it's the most evil abode or destination. We also see this with Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, many times in the people's minds, Sayyidina Umar, what do they think? They think of this person that just wants to chop people's heads off. But that was also his. We look at him when he became the Khalif. There was no one more merciful than him in how he treated creation, not just human beings, creation after when he had attained the Khilaf. To a point where when he saw a camel which was hungry, he started to cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and said, a camel in any part of the Islamic Khilafah, I will be responsible for it if this camel goes hungry. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تناجيتم فلا تتناجوا بالإثم والعدوان ومعصية الرسول وتناجوا بالبر والتقوى واتقوا الله الذي تحشرون. This Habib mentioned this earlier. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the meetings that people have, and in this particular case, the Jews in Medina and the hypocrites at that time. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم. There is no good in many of their meetings and conversations, right? And Habib is explaining النجوى التحادث فيما بينهم, that which people converse about. إلا من أمر بصدقة. And this is the rule, right? When you gather to speak with anyone, much of it will not be good except إلا من أمر بصدقة, except if it involves encouraging one another to charity, أو معروف, or some goodness, أو إصلاح بين الناس, or reconciling between people, right? And this is also the Quranic ayah have immense meaning. Meaning when people meet, look at when we meet, what do we speak about? If we do not speak about charity or enjoining goodness or any form of righteousness or islah bayn nas, generally shaitan will be putting you to do the exact opposite of this. We're meeting, we're sitting and talking, but we're eating the flesh of our brothers or sisters, speaking about someone, trying to cause enmity, trying to interpret the good things people did in the most evil way. They only did it because of this particular thing or that particular reason. Whoever meets for the sake of charity, encouraging charity, goodness, and reconciling between people, whoever does that, desiring the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will indeed give them a great reward. الحق تبارك وتعالى بمشيئته اختار أن يقذف في قلوبكم التصديق في هذه الرسالة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to His will and His favor upon you, He chose to cast into your hearts that you would believe in this message, you would be believers. ثم الشعور بواجبكم نحوها, and over and above, He cast this into your heart, but now also that you feel the responsibility that you have towards this message. وما طوقت به أعناقكم من مسؤوليتها, and what has been now metaphorically been placed, the responsibility placed on your necks. And what is your duty towards this message? من مسؤوليته, in your responsibilities in understanding it, في فهمها والعمل بها, in acting upon it, وتبليغها, right, and conveying it to people, والذب عنها, and defending it also from people who want to disparage Islam or the Prophet ﷺ or the Quran, or right. So believing in it, understanding it, acting upon it, conveying it, and defending it, right? فهي عبارة عن البيعة التي بايعنا الله عليها. And so this is indeed actually in reality what? That original covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took from us. When Allah took the covenant from us in the world of souls, this is what that covenant actually entails. That you will believe, understand, act, convey, and defend. And if you're doing this, then you're fulfilling your covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْعَهْدَ الَّذِي عَاهَدْنَاهُ عَلَيْهِ فِي الْأَزَلِ الْقَدِيمِ, and that covenant which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took from us in the eternal realm. وَإِذْ أَخَذَ رَبُّكَ مِنْ بَنِي آدَمَ, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verse of the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took from the sons of Adam alayhi salam min dhuhurim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the covenant from the sons of Adam alayhi salam that had been taken from their loins, right? And they were all sold before that. ذُرِّيَّتَهُمْ وَأَشْهَدُهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ, right? Adam alayhi salam and all of his children, right? They were lined up in the world of souls. وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them a proof against themselves by asking them, Alastu birabbikum, am I not your Lord? Right? And everyone replied, Bala. Every single soul on the earth that would come from mankind and jinn replied, Bala, and recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is their Lord, meaning that every person has a capacity to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has certain that they will go to hellfire that they would not respond. And so that this is the fitrah, the original fitrah. And therefore we need to realize, right, when we see Muslims being shy to convey the message, the power that this verse actually has for a da'i, right, in that you are not calling people to something which is not their origin. You are actually calling people back to what is their originality, right? And the truth and falsehood is actually calling them away from what is normal. Just to give you guys an example, right? And this I heard obviously from one of our brothers who had accepted Islam, and he was speaking about the morality of Islam. And he says how even in his family, right, even though they were Christian, but they weren't living, right? And so the woman in their family, they would dress inappropriately, and his sister was, she would model or do some of these things, right? And he said, what I found strange is that when she was modeling, right, she does it with all this, the way arrogance and whatever it is. But when we're sitting at home and someone looks at it, she gets shy. And she's, like, I can't, switch it off. I can't believe I actually did, right? And then this is the fitrah that we're talking about. Even though they are doing and they are flaunting and what we're talking about, all the different types of that the West is doing, right? But deep down inside, there's something that's not gelling with them in between this, right? They just have all the slogans, and the media makes it seem like there's a nice bubble there, but in their fitrah, they are at war with themselves, right? And when the woman then comes into Islam and she actually realizes, now she says, you know what? There's something. Some of them will understand it, obviously, because they know, and others don't. They say, there's just peace now, right? And in calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're calling them to the fitrah. If it is something that Islam wants, so for example, they attack the hijab and they attack the hijab movement, right? Even though there are people that are actively enmity towards it, deep down inside there's something. The technique of da'wah is to see how can we convey the message, right? So that we don't flare up all of their egos and whatever, but we get the message to them in a way that it will hit the fitrah, right? And it will expose that fitrah, and then you find that they can understand. And much of da'wah in this way, right, is not, when you talk of da'wah in this particular way, it's not even conveying the message, because if you say the fitrah is there, it's there, right? It's just dealing with people's egos, right? If the person has a very fiery ego, that you don't meet fire with fire, right? Da'wah, and even when you deal with Muslims, parenting as well, right? Spouses, everything, if you regard that as da'wah, is just dealing with people's egos. And the whole purpose of studying the science of the soul, right, and the purification of the heart is to learn what makes the ego, right, rebel, and what makes it subservient. If you know that with people, then you know how to actually deal with them. And you know that it's not about, because it's either your ego, or that person's ego, or your ego is responding to their ego. And if you know that the ego is this evil thing, or nafs, or whatever you want to call it, then whether they talk bad to you, whatever, you know that one of the best ways to even deal with people's egos is just not to respond, right? Let it slide, deal with it another time. And so this fitrah and this covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took with us from every single person exists in them, then we have a very powerful foundation with which to do da'wah. But the da'wah should not be also the expression of our ego, right? And many times in doing da'wah, we have to express our ego. I am doing my duty, So this is the ego of arrogance and pride now, right? And we want to make people feel that because of us that they are going to be guided. No. The true da'i is the one who's able to guide people without them even knowing that he had the hand in over and above his dua in the night and in the evening, crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the hidayah of people, right? But if there's something that needs to be corrected, or there's something, the message needs to be conveyed, he's able to even do it without that person even realizing that they are the one that actually. And can we do this amongst our spouses, our children, in our family? How we deal with our spouses and children, right, will also reflect how we do da'wah outside. إذن فالطاعة فَقُومُوا بِأَمْرِهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in taking this covenant, He was establishing to these souls that what? فَالطَّاعَةُ لِي, that obedience lies only for me. فَقُومُوا بِأَمْرِهِ, fulfill your duties towards me. فَأَرْسَلَ إِلَيْنَا الرُّسُلِ. And so to actualize this covenant that Allah took from us, what did He do? He sent messengers. Okay? حتى ختم الرسالة بخير البريات صلى الله عليه وسلم, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sealed the message with the final prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore the methodology of the prophets is the only methodology suitable for humankind. And when you speak to people, also one of the best ways of doing da'wah as well is to remind people about prophets. Right? When people are talking about all these different systems in place, it's impossible for a person to deny that there was a human being on earth called Ibrahim or Ibrahim, right? This is a historical, it's verified through what they say, tawatur. It's impossible for all of mankind or all of humankind throughout history to have lied that there was a person like Ibrahim, or at least a man who called himself Ibrahim and claimed to be a prophet. And likewise, history verifies that there was a person called Musa or Moses, Isa, all of these prophets. And people need to realize that, are all of these people lying? Right? Are all of these people that came and said that there is a God and He sent a message, whatever, are all of them lying? And then finally, Muhammad sallallahu is the final. Are they all lying? And would you believe now someone is born in this century, and he's telling you, and he wants to now negate thousands of years of history, right? Which people have been talking about. And so you need to remind people about the prophets and connect them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the prophets. This is known as the bottom-up approach. The top-down approach is to ask people to think about the universe and how Allah created things, and what do they call it? The cosmological argument, right? But the bottom-down approach, right, in that look at what these prophets came with and study their lives from objective sources, if we can use the word objective, right? That they were the perfect role models in society. They didn't commit sins, they didn't lie. Right? One of the most important things, also when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, people try and disparage the Prophet ﷺ in many different ways. And they would interpret some things that happen in the seerah in the most vilest of ways. Right? And then you find Muslims trying to, reply, then it becomes a tit for tat. Right? The question to all these people should be, bring one example, or one thing where the Prophet ﷺ spoke a single lie in his life. And if you can do that, then you have an art, right? Bring something to say that the Prophet ﷺ spoke a single lie in his life. I'm not saying they won't be able to do it. And look at now all of your role models and all of your people, what? Can you say the same about them? That they haven't spoken a single lie in his life. And the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced him to the ummah before his risala was a sadiq, that he had never lied. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has he not dwelled amongst you an entire lifetime? One of the proofs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran against the kuffar is what? His character. He's lived amongst you a lifetime, it was 40 years, right? And it was established that he was most truthful and trustworthy. And so in denying the Prophet ﷺ and not accepting his message, the implication is that he's lying. And he's not a liar. So therefore he has to be the Prophet, and what he brings is the truth. Alhamdulillah alladhi ataakum wa ataakum hadha al-khayr bi fadlihi wa bi karamihi wa ihsanihi. And so all praises are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gave you this goodness through his grace and his generosity and his kindness. ما استقبالكم لهذا الخير يكون قربكم من ربكم على قدر القوة في أخذ الأمر الرباني. And how you relate to this goodness and this blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how you accept it, right? And how you respond to it, that will determine your closeness to your Lord. على قدر القوة في أخذ الأمر الرباني, right? To the extent and determination that you now take on this responsibility and this great divine trust, the determination that you take it with, that will determine your proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وإفراد القصد بالواحد, and in your making your intention sincerely for him. لما أوحى الله إلى سيدنا يحيى, right? Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Yahya alayhi salam, يا يحيى خذ الكتاب بقوة. Oh Yahya, take the book with strength, meaning take it. This is something important, right? So when we take on the responsibility, or when we understand, when we say, okay, how do we take it with? It's these realizations. When you come to this realization that, listen, I'm not just an entity in this universe moving around. I have a mission. When a person realizes, you have now begun to take the message with strength. وقال لسيدنا موسى, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said to Musa alayhi salam, فَخُذْهَا بِقُوَّةٍ. Take it, right? بِقُوَّة means with strength, but meaning understand the weight of the message, understand the responsibility of it, understand the greatness of it, right? وَأْمُرْ قَوْمَكَ يَأْخُذُوا بِأَحْسَنِهَا. And then order your people to take the best of it. فَمَعَ قَصْدِ وَجْهِ اللَّهِ الْقَوِيِّ لَا يُنَاسِبُ قَصْدَ وَجْهِهِ إِلَّا الْقُوَّةُ فِي الْوِجْهَةِ. And so if a person desires to be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qualities, sifa is al-qawi al-matin. Al-qawi, he is the powerful and he is the strong, right? لا يناسب قصد وجهه إلا القوة في الوجه. It will not be appropriate in a person, right, wanting to seek the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that he has strength and determination in his accepting this responsibility. Meaning it's not a responsibility we take lightly, right? A person needs to really take this responsibility with strength, with understanding, with determination, right? And that will then relate into how you live your life, because it will want to be in fulfilling this responsibility. Al-quwwatu fil azim, a person needs to have strength in the determination. Al-quwwatu fil sidq, strength in the truthfulness, right? ثم مع هذه القوة وأخذ الأمر بالقوة طهر في الجنان. And then after this strength and determination, right, and fulfilling these duties with utmost resolve, طهر في الجنان, having a pure heart, right? باعتقاد الخير في المدعوين, right? And look how beautiful this is. You are taking this great responsibility to guide people and save humankind, right? But you have a pure heart. How? بِاعْتِقَادِ الْخَيْرِ فِي الْمَدْعُوِينَ. That you have a good opinion of even those that you are calling. Because you are calling them not for their salvation, but for whose salvation? For your own salvation, right? وَعَامَّةِ الْخَلْقِ أَجْمَعِينَ. And in all of creation, you have a good opinion about them. فضلا عن السابقين وعن الأخيار, over and above the pious, the awliya, and those that have passed before us. وعن أهل العبادة من المؤمنين, and those worshippers, those who are worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Is because sometimes you find that the da'is and the mujahids, what do they would? We are better than those who are just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala they're just worshipping Allah in the masajid. We are going out and saving people. You've had a bad opinion upon it, right? How do you fulfill the responsibility but still maintain a good opinion of the entire creation, in that everyone that you see doing something else or not doing what you're doing, you don't think that you are better than them, right? بحيث ينتفي منك الكبر على أحد منهم, so that you do not have pride and arrogance in your heart towards any of them. واعتقاد السوء في أحد منهم, and having a bad opinion about them. أصحاب الغفلة منهم الذنوب والمعاصي. They are people who are in ghafla, they are in sins. كلهم معرضون للمغفرة. All of them, it is possible that Allah will forgive them. Mu'arradun means that their sins are basically them presenting themselves for forgiveness. When a person is committing a sin, we see them as okay, right? The good opinion is that sin necessitates forgiveness, and they are only falling into that sin because Allah wants to forgive. What did the Prophet say? Right? If you do not commit sins, Allah would create a creation that would commit sins so that He would forgive them. Meaning, when there's a sin, Allah wants to forgive it. So if you see a person falling into sin, it's just a matter of time until Allah forgives this person, right? That is our opinion of that person, right? And many times a person who falls into a sin, the sin is there to make him humble. And then when he repents, he reaches a higher station than he was before. Your opinion of him changed, but in Allah's opinion now he is even better, right? مُعَرَّضُونَ لِلتَّوْبَةِ, they are presenting themselves for repentance, turning back to Allah. مُعَرَّضُونَ لِأَنْ يَقْرُبُوا مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ, that opportunity is there for them to become proximate to their Lord. مُعَرَّضُونَ لِأَنْ يَتَحَوَّلْ بَعِيدُهُمْ قَرِيبًا, there is an opportunity, right, that those that were now regarded as being distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be proximate to you. Right? Were we and you not like that as well? If you claim to be someone who is close to Allah, right? And a person should never believe that, right? But a person is thinking, were you born and you haven't committed sins your entire life? And so likewise, this person, their time is going to come, right? And look what Habib says, and then time to come, they will reach higher levels than you. And then can you go and sit at their feet and learn from them? Or will you be proud and arrogant, right? وَشَقِيٌّ سَعِيدًا, and those who were wretched amongst them will become felicitous. فَإِذَا لَا نَقْدِرُ فِيمَا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ أَن نَجْزِمَ بِالسُّوءِ عَلَى أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ فَإِذًا, therefore we cannot have any opinion, right, that this person will have an evil end, or this person is evil. So when you say someone is evil, or you look at someone and say this person is sin, it is because of sin having manifested from him. But in your mind, this is a good person. And Allah is going to accept him at the later stage, right? And so they say, hate the sin and not the sin. And people that understand this, you can see the way they deal with people. Your worst enemies, even the kuffar, right? Even on the battlefield, those that were even killing the Sahaba, how they hated the sin, not the... Because tomorrow when that person accepts Islam, but you have hatred towards their person, you'll not be able to deal with them, right? And how there were many Sahaba, I mean, they fought each other in Uhud, and then they accepted Islam, right? And some of them had killed their own parents and brothers and siblings, but they understood that this was the sin is separate from the person committing the sin. فإذا لا نقدر فيما بيننا وبين الله أن نجزم بالسوء على أحد منهم, and so therefore we cannot, in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make a statement or believe that these people are evil. Between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a different story, that doesn't concern us. But between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to have a good opinion. بل الكافر بعينه ما نقدر نحكم عليه بعينه. Even the disbeliever, we cannot say that this person is going to hell. Do we have the keys for Jannah or the sigil, the register of Jannah, to say who's going to heaven and who's going to heaven, right? لأنه ربما أسلم في أي وقت وأي ساعة, because at any time they can accept Islam and come to the faith. إذا ينتفي عنا الكبر وينتفي عنا العجب بأنفسنا. And so in this way we need to, the person is to remove pride and arrogance and conceit and ostentation from themselves. Doing this duty, we don't have a bad opinion about people. And I've heard of my own ears as well, Habib Umar mentioning this, right? When you remind the students many times about this, he said, it is very possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take a person who is in the depths of kufr, disbelief, into Islam and teach him and raise him and purify him, so that this person then becomes our teachers. And then we have no problem going and taking benefit from them if we see that they are someone whom Allah has given special distinction. And so every person that you call to Allah, that you see, there's a possibility that that person might be your Shaykh and your teacher one day. And there's no problem in doing that, because now the responsibility is given for them, and they might be able to teach us things that we didn't. If we understand that the goal is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and getting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we don't have this thing about wanting to manifest our own egos. And many times, this is the way Allah will test you in the path. Imam Ghazali mentions this as well, right? About students on the path, and if people, look at the people, there's all, the ego is always trying to manifest itself in different ways. And those that raise above it are those that desire even more for themselves than they desire for others. Not because things in this world, whatever manifests, this one has more, this one has less, that doesn't mean. But how do I relate my heart to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In me desiring that, I know that is what makes Allah pleased with me. And whether that has a physical benefit in this world for me or not is unimportant. But how do I relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. آخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر